All right then. Well,
I think we're live. I think we did it.
we are live, folks. There is nothing quite as interesting and fun as live TV, especially when you're the studio, the director, and the talent. Oh, I gotta turn that down right away. Hang on. Time for some headphones here. Um, thank you, thank you for your patience. Um,
That's all right. We were all just birding out our window while you were doing that. So, you know, I see a whole bunch of
uh,
people chiming in already on the chat. So,
Yes, there are a lot of people on the chat, and again, sorry for being so late. And those of you who are coming over, thanks, Carl. It was worth the wait. And thank you for the happy birthday wishes. Um, the problem here is that Facebook, which tends to happen a lot, doesn't want to connect. I'm looking at the thing here, and it's just doing Facebook stuff. So here we are. And thank you all for joining us. And sorry we're a little bit late. And sorry we haven't been around for the past few weeks. Scheduling has been very difficult as people are traveling and have family commitments and other things. So, but we are glad to be back. Nate, unfortunately, had one of those scheduling things pop up at the very last minute. And my dear friend Matt Igleski was able to jump in at the very last minute and join us to talk about some birds. As you can see behind him, Matt is with the Chicago Bird Alliance, which is formerly Chicago Audubon Society. And he is the executive director there. And yeah, Time Panini, damn you, Zuckerberg. I feel the same way right now. Matt, how you doing?
good, really good. Did a little birding this morning before I came to the office. Saw
Cool,
some
cool.
warblers. Yeah, you know, the things that you want to see this time of year when it's almost mid-May. We're like about our peak, I think, pretty soon here.
Cool. Maybe we, as you can guess, we didn't have time to do much prep here because we were trying to get everything connected. Maybe sit a little closer to your computer so your microphone is picking you up just a little better there,
Okay,
if you can.
let's do that. There we go.
There, that's a little better.
Okay, sounds
Um,
good.
cool. So the way this works, folks, is we go through the What's This Bird group that we have on Facebook, and I pull out pictures that interest me for various reasons, and then we'll throw them up here and discuss. But also, as you can see here, if you're on YouTube, and would have been on Facebook if we could, we are watching the comments here. So if you've got something to say, you got a question for us, we will do our best to get in there and answer your questions or just chat with you. I do want to say hi to some regulars. Boy, we got a lot of people piled in here. We have Scott Hickman. Oh, Wayne Klockner. Oh, the boss is in. Boy, I'm sorry, boss. We're a little late today. Mia's here. We got Carmen. We got Carl, as I said. Ed, Kenora. So, yeah, glad that you guys are all here with us. And before we jump into the birds, I got a couple of things I want to talk to you guys about. The first one is our ABA Community Weekend coming up in Minneapolis, Minnesota on the weekend of the 25th and 26th. If you are in the Minneapolis area, you do not want to miss this. We are going to be hosting this along with Dorian Anderson of bicycle birding fame, Steve Ball, Severson, Kelly Hoyt, Brogan Alley, and our own Katinka Doman for a weekend of birding in Minneapolis. We're going to do some urban birding hotspots by bicycle, so that sounds like it's going to be a lot of fun. There are some evening presentations. There's also a Birds and Beers social. So this is going to be a really good time. And here's a really cool thing. You guys, you've seen the ads, you've seen people talk about it, but if you haven't tried out OM system cameras, they are the bomb. Matt, that's what I use. It's good kit, I'm telling you. And and they're gonna have cameras and lenses there for loan during the field trip. So if you want to get out in the field and see what OM system cameras are all about, you'll be able to do that then. And also, ABA members get a 10% discount, which on camera gear that's substantial.
That's a good discount.
It's a good discount.
Yeah.
So yeah, ABA members get 10% off on OM system cameras. You can hit that QR code and bookmark it for later, or just come back here on YouTube and hit that barcode or that QR code. Sorry. Yeah, get your discount on what I think is some of the best birding photo gear out there, period.
It's exciting that you get to try it out. So that's a huge benefit. Maybe I'll drive up there, It's not too far from Chicago.
You should. I will tell you what, I've got the 150 to 400, and which is sort of their flagship lens. And it blows everything else out of the water. I mean, now again, when you're talking at that level, it's kind of fine points, but boy, it's good. It's fast. It's sharp. It's excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So gonna just glance here through the comments before we jump into birds. And just say hi to Sarah Coffey, Rachel Brenner, Steve Williams. Nolan is in from Arlington Heights, and not sure what Mike Curlew's talking about, where there might be mosquitoes, but
I don't know. He's part of that.
I don't know. I missed that. But it is 17 past the hour, so let's jump into some birds. And this first one, actually, I was with you. We both saw this bird, Matt.
We both saw it at separate times. It was the first bird I saw when I pretty much entered Montrose last week.
Yeah, it was the first, so it was Wednesday. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the ABA staff was in Chicago for a couple of days for a staff retreat. Got a lot of work done. Got to meet some of my coworkers face to face for the first time, because we all work virtually. So that was really cool. But that Wednesday morning we spent at Montrose Point, which is arguably one of the best migration hotspots in the United States. And one of the first birds we ran across was this bird. And so here's what happened, and here's what I want to talk about. We're walking down a trail, and I've got 8 or 10 extremely experienced long-term birders with me. And one of them looks up and says, "Eastern wood pewee." And we all look at it and we're like, cool. And I glanced at it and I'm like, looks a little dark. And I took some pictures of it. And I said out loud while I was taking the pictures, I said, "This bird's really dark, and the wing bars are really dark." Mm-hmm. And I'm going to take some pictures to send to Sin-T Lee, who recently released his Flycatcher field guides, because he talks a lot about the difference in pewee wing bars as a way to identify eastern and western. And this bird didn't fit anywhere in there in my memory. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to get some pictures of this bird and send them to him, because he's going to be interested in this. And then about a half an hour later, I run into Matt on the other side of Montrose Point, and I'm like, "Hey, yeah, look at this." And I'm showing him on the back of my camera, and as soon as I looked at it, I'm like, "Wait, that's an olive-sided flycatcher." Mm-hmm. That's not an eastern wood pewee at all.
You got a much better look here than what I got when I first looked at it too, because I thought pewee as well when I first saw it, but I saw it more from the front, where you kind of saw that vest look. The lighting was terrible. And so, the one thing that I know we were talking about is that a lot of times too, you already have this predisposition for what you expect to see at certain times
Right.
of the year. And I think that also played into, me also kind of playing it off as, oh, I think that was just a peewee. Yeah, okay, peewee. Kept moving on and
Exactly. And exactly. I mean, because olive-sided flycatcher shouldn't have been there. It was 2 weeks early for the average date. I mean, they usually show up around the 15th or so. Early ones around the 10th. But then that's something that one of the hardest parts of birding is looking at every bird, like really looking at every bird. And that's how a lot of good birds just slip on by, because something gets in your head, like somebody next to you who you trust, to make the ID, that says, oh, it's a that, but they weren't right. But you're like, oh, cool, they got it. You don't even look at, even though you're like I shot 30 pictures of this bird. So I'm looking at it long enough to take 30 pictures, and it just didn't register. And that's a really big pitfall of birding. But while we're at it, let's look at the differences between those two species, eastern wood pewee and olive-sided flycatcher, because they can be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it looks obvious the way you have it there, but in the field, it's always a lot harder than the lighting is bad. You're looking at it from underneath. Like, this is a pretty nice comparison if you can see them from the side like this.
Absolutely. But some of the things that you can see just, as the birds are moving around, the pewee is just much slimmer. It's got a longer tail proportionally. They both have long wings, but the olive-sided flycatcher has really long wings. Yeah. When I first looked at that, when I was chimping with you, looking at the back of my camera, the bill size is what stuck out to me. As soon as, I saw that face, that big, thick bill and that dark head, I'm like, wait.
Yeah, and the bill color should have been, there should have been a little more yellow at least.
A little bit of yellow at the base.
A little bit, at the base. But once again, when you can zoom in on your camera, that's actually almost a better view than when you're looking through binoculars. So
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And and it's and it's different. You get distracted. You get distracted by things. And trying to look through some of the comments here.
Especially when
it looks like
you're hurry and go fast before you go to work. That was my situation.
Oh yeah, well that's
when you're kind of hurrying and you're kind of looking at like, okay, that's a peewee. I'm going to move on to the next bird because I want to hurry up and get as much birding in as I can before I go to work. That also plays into some of it.
Yeah, well, and it's happened with really rare birds. I don't know if Matt, the story of the red cockaded woodpecker that was up at one of the state parks up north of Chicago. When it was first found, 3 or 4 really good birders glanced at the bird, just didn't even look at it, and assumed that it was a downy woodpecker because that's the small black and white woodpecker that could look at it. And one person looked at it a little bit longer and was like, wait a minute. And that was, the first red cockaded woodpecker in modern times in Illinois.
Yeah. The other thing about this bird, in my experience with this actual individual, is that when I circled the hedge or the little path that a lot of us go down that's paved in Montrose, is when I came back from the backside after someone told me it was an olive-sided, I went back and looked at it, and you can't see it in this photo, but a lot of times with olive-sided, they have that little white tuft that kind of like comes out from behind their wing. And that was so obvious once I had it back to me when I went back to it. So that's another one of those things that can change depending on how the bird is sitting. Sometimes that's not very obvious or it's not really visible. But once you see it, it's one of those like defining characteristics of this.
Absolutely. And they can, they can tuck those things, or they can fluff them out. And if they are fluffed out, which they often are, as you said, it's just plainly obvious what the bird is. Okay, this next one comes from Phoenix, Arizona. And if ever there was an angry bird, I think this is it.
This is one I definitely don't have any personal experience with, but I knew at least generally what it was when I first saw it, just because I've seen it so many times in the field guide, just because of eye color. That was the one thing I noticed right away. And
it's interesting, the eye color is what threw off the person who posted it. And because if you made the eyes dark, it gives it an entirely different aura. So the person who posted it, because of the angle of the bill and the way we're looking straight down the culmen, which is a little bit curved on this species, and the eye color, the poster thought that it might be a curve-billed thrasher. And
it's in Arizona, which is like, that's a common backyard bird,
common backyard bird.
That makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. But it's again, it's funny how you get one thing stuck in your head, and so here you see the eye color along with what appears to be a curved bill, and your brain just discounts everything else that's happening because of that thing you saw. So let's compare this bird with a curve-billed thrasher. And it's obviously not a curve-billed thrasher.
Yeah. I mean, the coloration alone is already pretty different if you're familiar with thrashers of that lighter, warmer brown color, longer tail, that faint little, almost like a little bit of spotting on the chest, not as much as obviously some of the other thrashers and that, genus, but definitely different color,
Yeah, and the tail length and the tail spots, we can see the underside of the tail extremely well on the bronzed cowbird on the left, which is what this bird is. But if you just look at the eye color and the bill, there's a lot of similarities there. And that's, again, that's pitfalls like that. It's hard to do. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times on this show I've said birding is hard. And it's because of stuff like that.
Well, it's really hard when you're looking at one photo too. There's always like behavioral things you can key in on as well that help you with identification. But the other thing that does stand out in this photo, even though it's maybe subtle, is that you can see that the bill does look bigger on the bronze cowbird once you see these side by side. You can see the width and thickness of.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Definitely a much bigger bill. So.
Absolutely, yeah. And Alex Cruz points out in the comments about the Facebook problem, and yeah, Alex, I posted a link in the live thing on Facebook to this YouTube chat in the discussion. I hope people can go there and we'll see that, and we'll go there. Looks like we got a nice little crowd here in YouTube. But for whatever reason, Facebook just checking the connection. It's still spinning and still trying to connect. I have no idea what's going on there. So we'll just have to do some forensics after the fact. Let's take a look at our next bird. And this one is from New York. And what do we got here?
Looks like it's eating some jelly.
Yeah.
That's a clue, right?
I guess.
Well, certain birds will come to your jelly feeder.
So it's got to be it's got to be a tanager.
Well, I've had catbirds. I've had house finches come to my feeder, my jelly feeder. But I see orange and I see black and I see
orange and black. That's a pretty good giveaway.
Yeah, and it's in New York.
That's true. So we've got an oriole. Sarah Coffey asked, "What was that last bird?" That was a female bronzed cowbird. And Susan Nelson asks if this is an orchard oriole. And that is exactly what the person who posted it thought it might be. And it is not an orchard oriole.
I see some people saying black-headed grosbeak, which is actually, it looks similar. The bill would be much bigger if it was black-headed grosbeak, but
absolutely.
I could see that the color scheme is there.
The color scheme is there, yeah. But the bill, look at how sharp and pointy and spike-like.
Yeah,
the bill is.
A blackbird and icterid, characteristic, that bill. So
exactly, it's not that big, thick, chunky grosbeak bill that cracks anything that gets in front of it, including fingers. So let's take a look at our orioles that are expected in Rochester. And in this messy plumage, it can be tough, but the bird in question here is a Baltimore oriole. And on the right, we have an orchard oriole in breeding plumage, a male in breeding plumage. And the first thing you'll note is the difference in the base color. The orchard oriole, even this bird, which is kind of pale, sometimes they're so dark that it looks like they're just black all over. But the color is much darker, and it's not orange. It's sort of a chestnut brick kind of color, rather than the sort of bright orange of a Baltimore oriole.
Yeah, I was thinking of Baltimore Orioles being sort of like, they're wearing like their hunter's vest, like they have that bright, really flashy orange. And then, yeah, basically, like you said, the color of a brick. Like, I feel like that brick red color is usually very obvious on an orchard oriole.
Exactly. And you can see in the immature male, first year male, up above, how that brick color is starting to come in on the breast. And orchard oriole and Baltimore oriole at this time of year, the young males can be very, very messy. But they're messy in very different ways. So they're actually easier to tell apart at that age, because the Baltimore oriole always, for the most part, has a pretty good suggestion of what the adult plumage is going to be like. Whereas the orchard oriole, it starts with that black face mask that's more suggestive of some of the Western orioles, like hooded. But then it's kind of greenish all over. And then as it transitions, it's got kind of this green, chestnut, brick, black kind of combo. And then it really transitions fast. I have never, and I've seen a lot of orchard orioles, I have never seen one that's more advanced than the one at the top. It's like it looks like that, and then all of a sudden it's in adult plumage, and it just. Whereas Baltimore oriole,
in between those two plumages,
I
don't know where they're doing it. They're hiding.
I don't.
Somewhere.
Yeah. But Baltimore oriole is like everything in between female and adult breeding plumage male. And another thing about orioles that's interesting, and a lot of birds, but female Baltimore orioles, as they age, take on plumage characteristics of males. So an adult female can sort of start to look like this bird, this Baltimore oriole on the left.
Totally. I actually almost thought maybe this would be a female when I first saw it.
It very well could be an older female. Because it's messy, but it's kind of messy in a really weird way.
Yeah. And it's not as bright, it's not as bright orange, and that tends to be more of the female characteristic, to be that kind of muted orangey yellow color.
Exactly.
Which is another thing to key in on, because usually the orchard oriole, like you said, tends to be on the green yellow side of the spectrum, both the male and the female, versus the orange yellow end of the spectrum, which I always associate with Baltimore orioles. Yeah.
Just looking here to see if we have any more comments. And okay, it's all about the oriole, and I think we've got that one figured out. A couple more birthday wishes for me. Thanks again, you guys. I really appreciate it. We will jump to our next. Oh, wait, we got one more here. Spot on with your comment about the young orchard orioles looking like the Western ones. First time I saw one, I was absolutely convinced I found a rarity for the East. Yeah, if you're not familiar with first-year orchard orioles, the first time you see one, it doesn't look like anything you're expecting to see. And yeah, you go into the orioles and you see all those Western ones, you're like, whoa! But yeah, and the other, another thing with orchard orioles, it's really a small, compact bird. The females, when they're in their bright, spring plumage, all yellow, green, with wing bars, people confuse them with warblers more often than orioles, I think.
Yeah. The size is always hard anyway, right? You know? I feel like that's one of those things that's really hard. Even as an experienced birder, you see things just in a wrong way, and it just looks small. It looks big. Had that experience last week with like a tanager, as a female scarlet tanager. When you haven't seen one for a whole year, you're like, what warbler is this? And then you start really looking at it and you realize, oh, it has a big bill. You know, you start looking at all the other characteristics, but size sometimes really plays tricks on you when you're out in the field.
Absolutely. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times on What's This Bird in the group we've had somebody post a house finch and, you know, at the tip top of a pine tree or something. And they're convinced this bird was as big or bigger than a blue jay. And it's clearly a house finch and it's clearly not that big. Or it's a robin and they're convinced it's the size of a hawk, like it's the size of a Cooper's hawk, you know, or a red-shouldered hawk. And it's clearly an American robin. And Alex Cruz says, sometimes I think bay-breasted warblers are orchard orioles. Yeah, the same color mix. I mean, look at that. It does look like a bay-breasted warbler.
Yeah.
But yeah, size when there's nothing to directly compare it to can be very, very, very difficult. And when the bird isn't around other birds, yeah, it's push size off to the very last thing that you try to use to identify a bird.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, let's go to Palatine, Illinois, back to the Chicago area.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, what do we got here?
Right? It's kind of a seagull.
It's not a seagull, and this is now the last time that you will be invited here for saying that word. No, but if you did think it was a gull, nobody would hold you, well, especially you. Sorry, we just do this all the time. This is like a cut. It's in the same it's in that same part of the book and is a relative of the gulls, but this is a tern, and the person who posted it couldn't tell if it was a Forster's tern or a common tern, and
I saw this Caspian too in the chat, which, you know, we do have a lot of Caspian terns around.
We do have a lot of Caspian terns, and you know, I didn't. Again, I didn't think to throw a Caspian tern into the comp simply because that's not what was discussed in the group. And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. We've got
huge carrot bill, huge.
Exactly.
Huge they're much larger than these guys. But yeah, like if you just see one bird like in a photo like this, like we said,
yeah, you don't know. You don't know how big that is. And it also it's kind of overall kind of slim. You know, Caspian terns are big, bulky birds. They're the size of a ring-billed gull, and they're built like a ring-billed gull and could probably beat one in a freestyle fight. And this just doesn't give off any of that vibe. But we also see the tail, and Caspian tern has a really short tail. Yep. And this bird's tail is easily as long as the wingtips, and it looks to me like it's sticking out beyond the wingtips, which is kind of a clue.
But it's not. It's not as long as it could be. I feel like I've seen long.
Yeah. So let's cut to the chase here. Yeah. The bird that we're talking about is a Forster's tern, and here we have it compared with a common tern. And you know, a few things that you'll notice. The differences are subtle, but they are there. And as we were just talking about the tail length, so look at the common tern on the left, which is in very crisp, fresh plumage. The tail really doesn't stick out beyond the wingtips, whereas in Forster's tern, even a bird like this that the tail isn't fully grown in. I mean, it's still showing a little bit of. It's not 100% transitioned here. The tail is as long or longer than the wingtips. So that's one thing to look for.
Yeah. I will say it's like it's close in these two, you know, and it depends on the angle. Like when you're looking at
it does.
Like, you know, like I was appreciating this separation a lot more last week when I had some friends with me that really wanted to see a common tern, and we were trying to make a Forster's into a common, and you could see how people could get hung up on the tail length thing, because a lot of those Forsters had really long tails, really short tails.
Yeah.
You know, depending on what plumage they're in, depending on the angle that they're sitting. So that can be a tough one to, gauge depending on what kind of look you're getting at the time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, it's with terns like gulls and a lot of birds, it's all about gestalt.
Yep.
You can't get hung up on one field mark. It's the combination of the whole, the combination of the parts which are bigger than the whole. And if you look at the wingtips, if you look at a field guide, it will say that Forster's tern has silvery wingtips and common tern has blackish wingtips. Well, when they're folded like this, the outer webs of a common tern in very fresh plumage like this are every bit as silvery and shiny as a Forster's tern. So if the bird doesn't get up and fly, you really can't tell using that mark, because both are darker on the undersides, although common tern is darker than Forster's, and on the upper side, in the in bright sunlight, as often they are, with a very fresh bird like this common tern on the left, that field mark is kind of like, eh.
Yeah, I feel like shadows in the sun and anything black and gray, it's just so hard. Like
it is.
When they're just flying too, they're catching the light all sorts of different ways. We kept trying to look for the field mark. I was trying to look for was that tiny little black edge on the outsides of the tail for the common tern. But man, Forsters, when they're turning in the sunlight like that,
you can't. Yeah.
It kind of gives you that impression. Yeah.
We've got a couple people here who really liked your carrot-billed tern in the comments. Rachel Brenner says if they rename Caspian tern, it should be carrot-billed tern. I agree. That's a really good name for it.
Tern. Yeah. Frosty tern.
A couple other things to look at with these two birds here. The bill size. Forster's tern that's like one thing that's not really subjective. It's that the lighting doesn't matter. It's not a carrot-billed Caspian tern. But Forster's tern does have a bigger, heavier, longer bill. And once you get familiar with what that bill looks like, especially it's got a heavier base. Look at how fine-tipped the common tern is compared to the Forsters. So bill size is an important thing.
Bill size, and then I the other one that I was really trying to stress was that, and I've seen it in the comments now, the stubby little legs on the common tern. That's a pretty good characteristic to look for as well.
When they're standing on the beach together, common terns are the shorties. The Forster's tern stand like a head taller. It's a bigger bird, but it also has considerably longer legs and bigger feet. I mean, look at how teeny tiny those common tern feet and legs are. And Arctic tern is even shorter, if you can believe it. It's almost like a nighthawk, waddles around on the sand. And we didn't get into Arctic tern or roseate tern because both of those would be extremely rare in Illinois. However, Arctic terns, I mean, there've been a couple in Wisconsin in the last week. So
they come through, but we don't get them,
Yeah, we don't get as many terns as they do up in Wisconsin because our fishery just isn't as good as it is further north. So the birds don't really stick around here.
I would say the other major thing that the thing that I key in on more than anything else is that smudgy gray breast, right? Like if you look at that common tern on the left, the wing just blends right into the body versus the Forster's tern has that pretty stark contrast between the white breast and the gray wing, whereas common tern is just a kind of overall more gray bird.
Absolutely. And if you see them in flight, especially when they're foraging, they're very, very different birds. Forster's tern is a marsh tern, and common tern is it breeds on big lakes and seacoast. And Forster's tern has a floaty, very languid, very graceful flight with this long tail and silvery wingtips, and it's kind of slow, whereas common tern is very direct and quick. and just a very different impression when the birds are in the air. And if you have both of them flying over the same lake or the same water, it's pretty easy to tell them apart just based on the way they fly and the way they feed. And
Wayne was also
Wayne says that ambient light can affect he says Forster's in flight, light gray tail and pure white rump, whereas common has a white tail and a white rump. But yes, ambient light, and both of these birds are in rather harsh light, and you can see, even though that common tern does have a grayish breast, and it really makes that white cheek patch stand out. Lighting with gray birds, white birds, lighting can mess you up big time. It
doesn't help on the big lake when you have a bright sunny day where it's reflecting the light back up.
Exactly. I've got a photo that I use often to show that on this show of two herring gulls standing on the same pier side by side, a male and a female, and one is facing slightly to the left, the sun's coming from the left, and the other one is facing slightly to the right, and the color of their mantle, that's the gray back, are as different. I mean, they're just very noticeably different, and that's all lighting because those birds are the same.
You sure it wasn't a Vega? It was a Vega.
Positive.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, this one, every once in a while, I throw up. Well, not every once in a while. Every time, I try to throw up a bird that Nate and I will disagree over. And when I saw this one, I thought, okay, this one I think might work. So yeah, again, we'll cut to the chase. This is a thrush. They're common migrants across the ABA area, the various Catharus thrush species, everything, from Swainson's to hermit, wood thrush, Vireo, and all of that. But this bird looks weird.
It's obviously a hermit thrush.
Yeah, it's very dark. It's very dark. It's got a very noticeably rufous tail and some rufous in the wings. But boy, it doesn't look like a hermit thrush to me. And this is a tough bird. So let's get into looking. I'll tell you what I think it is, and we can discuss. I think this bird is a gray-cheeked thrush, and that's it at the bottom left. And even though it has a russet tail and some russet color in the wings, gray cheeks can do that. And I think part of what's going on here, I'm going to back up to those other two pictures. I think the bird is wet.
Yeah.
I think this bird is also not in great health because the feathers around the base of its bill are missing, and it's making it the bill look longer than it normally does. Mm-hmm. And the bird, birds have oils in their feathers that keep them dry. Even they can get soaked, but this bird just looks kind of wet and messy, which sometimes is a clue that it's not in the best of health. And it could just be really old. I mean, look at me. I don't look like I did 10
Well, I mean,
years ago.
I feel like it could have just been feeding too, right? Like I feel like you get mud and water and stuff on the base of the bill. It might just be
yeah,
muddy.
and that's true. It does have mud on its bill. But the nares are completely exposed, and the whole base of the bill is completely exposed. But when we look at hermit and gray cheek together, we could see that really they look pretty different. The hermit thrush has a much cuter face, partially because of the eye ring and sort of the more open, pale face. It has the least amount of spotting on the breast of any of our thrushes. The bird in question has a lot of spotting on a rather dark underside. But look at the face. The face is dark. There's only like a quarter of an eye ring on the back. all of that to me adds up to a gray cheek thrush, I think.
Yeah. You know, I think the thing that would be the slam dunk, as usual with photos, is if you actually saw this bird in real life, right? So if you saw this bird in real life, it'd be very easy to separate because the hermit thrush would probably eventually do its little tail wag.
Which is why I put the one up there with the tail up.
And you would know it was a hermit thrush. So yeah, it's another one of the pitfalls of trying to ID things just from like a single or couple photos, is not being able to observe that behavior.
Absolutely. And
there's a really good question in the chat that I don't know if we want to cross that bridge, but how do you exclude bicknells?
You know what? I did that yesterday when I got these pictures. I went deep and I tried to see if there was any way this could possibly be a Bicknell's thrush, and not from these photos. There's nothing you can do there.
Okay.
Yeah. But they do. Bicknell's does tend to have a little more russet in the tail and the wings than gray cheek, but there is so much overlap, and it's not really. You've got to do it by voice.
Well, does anybody get them in migration? Like, I've never heard of
Florida
anyone.
does.
Yeah.
Florida does, and like New York has, and a couple. Cape May has.
Yeah. I guess we don't have enough experience, or at least I don't, in the Great Lakes area with even thinking about a Bicknell's as a possibility. It would be like impossible.
So Carl Giametti says that the difference between the mantle and tail feathers says hermit thrush to me. So there we know that it's a gray cheek. So if Carl thinks it's a hermit thrush, we know it's a gray cheek.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna throw him under the bus, but my little scarlet tanager story, I'm not gonna say who I was with last week.
Oh no, Carl's a brother to us and a really good sport.
Yeah, I know.
But no,
I'm like actually with Carl. Like, I'm still kind of torn. I'd really like to see this bird in person.
Yeah,
because that tail feels really red. Like, I almost would still go hermit, but I see what you're saying with the kind of tones, the color tones, and the face, and especially the spot on
the face chest. And the spotting are the two things.
Yeah.
Carl retracts his happy birthday wish. Touche, brother, touche. But the face and the spotting and the dark. The especially how dark it is, like right here, that's what did it for me. Gray cheek thrush doesn't sort of have that separated malar from the face. It all just kind of globs together. Whereas the hermit thrush, you see that little bit of like whitish grayish buff that's above the malar. For those of you who don't know what the malar is, it's also called the mustache stripe that comes off the base of the bill and goes down the sides of the throat. And you can see how the hermit thrush has that little bit going on there, and the gray cheeks just don't. Their face is just all kind of dark.
But I think, like you said, you established it's possibly a little bit of a wet bird, so I feel like that also is making those kinds of features really get muddled if it's a little bit of wet or mud or something that's like
it does. And let's also not forget that different cameras can do different things with color. And it's I mean, those colors could be pumped up a little bit by the camera. I don't really think they are, because the bill, the leg color, I mean, the leg color might be a little dark. It's really hard to tell. And one other thing I noticed too is that there's a little bit of brownish coloring on the flanks, whereas hermit thrush usually has kind of they have maybe a little bit of buff or gray on the flanks, but not that sort of same color as the back. That sort of just blends over there.
There's a question too about wet feathers accounting for.
Yeah, I'm reading that. Would wet feathers account for lack of eye-ring and gray in front of the eye?
Yeah.
I mean, it could, but I'm looking at this on a big monitor, so I'm looking at this blown up pretty big. I think that just the front part of it's really hard to tell what's going on here is the bottom line. But I feel that this bird's gestalt all adds up to gray cheek thrush. But this is one of those cases where if somebody had other photos or a video that showed that it wasn't,
Right.
Wouldn't be
This
the
is a
first
good
time.
case. Yeah, this is a good case where even if you had like a bad cell phone photo, like you could tell just by behavior, probably. Like I said, eventually you'd see that
Yeah,
tail.
cell phone video. Yeah.
Yeah, even a cell phone video would do it. So yeah, but yeah, this can be like these are hard birds to separate unless you get a good look anyway. And so yeah, it doesn't help that I think that little bit of wet and some other things are bringing into question some of those finer features that might not be actually real, if it's wet or muddy or something. But I appreciate your stance on this, Greg, and I think it is a great hermit thrush example that you brought to us today. So.
Alrighty then.
How about we just go with Catheris spa? Put it on eBird as that.
Well, sure.
Yeah, there you go. You can't be wrong there.
This one comes to us from Arizona. Boy, what do you see here? What do we got?
It's very plain. And if I didn't know where we were, well, I don't know, because obviously this is a bird that's pretty widespread. I don't know if Arizona really helps or hurts your case here. But yeah,
I mean, it's a little greenish grayish bird. It's got kind of a
little bit of a wing bar.
Is it a warbler? Is it a?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Is it a verdin?
I think it's a wet ruby crown kinglet.
Tail is way too long, and it doesn't have the black secondary or third, whatever. The base of the primaries aren't black, and the tail is way too long. So we've got two really good clues, three really good clues about what this bird is.
One, right? Yeah.
At least, what is it?
The bill's a good clue.
Well, that's it. Yeah. So the three clues that I'm thinking of are the flowers. We can see the size of the bird based on the stems and flowers that it's sitting in. So this is a small bird. Yeah. As Matt just said, the bill. I mean, it's got sort of a heavyish bill for a little bird like this, but we can see like a little hook, just a little hook on the tip of the bill, and that's key. And then so the kind of
warbler excludes warbler, that excludes kinglet, that excludes some of those other ones we were.
Verdin definitely.
Yep.
But the sturdy gray legs, that's something that always stands out on this family of birds. Is at least all the ones that we have here in the ABA area have sturdy gray legs, and those are Vireo marks. Vireos have those sturdy gray legs and the sturdy bill with a hook tip. So which Vireo here are we looking at?
Well, if we went through all the Vireos that I know, that I encounter the most, this is definitely the one I don't see the most. But all the ones I usually see have a much stronger spectacle, So that would be one thing that I would be more expecting to see, even on a warbling Vireo, which is probably our plainest Vireo that's super common. You still see a little bit more, I think, facial marking, and then you don't really see that little wing bar. So if you're in warbling Vireo territory, you're thinking totally plain. So that little wing bar is a big clue.
Little wing bar is a big clue. The long tail is a big clue. The warbling Vireo, Philadelphia Vireo, red-eyed Vireo. I mean, you wouldn't really get red eyes out west, but they have shorter tails. They're stockier, more compact birds. This bird is kind of almost chickadee-like in how long and small and cute it is.
And habitat would be a big clue if you, at least in our area, at least in the Midwest, habitat would be another.
Yeah, but during migration, anything goes. I've seen all. Yeah. So it doesn't have a white eye, so we can get rid of white-eyed Vireo. And white-eyed Vireo has very bold spectacles and bold wing bars, and it's just it's a really pretty bird. But this is not a white-eyed Vireo.
Yeah.
But in Arizona, that leaves us with really two that look like this, and that's Bell's Vireo and Gray Vireo. So let's take a look. Let's take a look at that. Kathy says that she had a red-eyed Vireo in Albuquerque last year. That's a good bird out there.
Yeah.
So let's take a look at Gray and Bell's and see what comes up. And as you can see, I think this is a Bell's Vireo. And when you compare the two, the color, the base color, that can be all over the board. Lighting, age, all of it. But the Bell's Vireo tends to be yellower and greener than the gray Vireo, which, as you can guess, is very gray. The tail length, very similar. The wing length, very similar. Gray Vireo tends to have, at least the Western ones, more of that kind of a spectacle that you were talking about, the eye ring with the little white lures. But look at the bills. Look at the difference in the size of the bills, the chunky, I don't know what the heck those gray Vireos are chomping on out there, but whatever it is, they're crushing stuff that the Bell's Vireos just can't get at. I think the gray Vireos are catching little lizards and stuff or something. Because this looks to me like a Bell's Vireo.
And there's actually a good question.
You're gonna come at me on that one?
No, I'm not, because this is like, I can't even pretend to have that much experience with both. Bell's Vireo is pretty like sparse for us up here, and then
sit a little closer. You're fading on me.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was saying, Bell's Vireo is a pretty like sparse bird for us. So I haven't seen many of them, especially in comparison to a gray Vireo. I can't even think if I've seen a gray Vireo. I'd have to check.
I've seen a lot of Bell's Vireos, mostly out on the Mississippi, where they're fairly easy to find. But the only gray Vireos I've seen is when I lived in Colorado, and that was in the 80s. So I haven't seen a gray Vireo in a long, long time.
Yeah. But Rachel actually had a really good question about the reflection of the like flowers and everything, and the leaves, because that is a real concern a lot of times. You get that like,
absolutely
greenish hue or yellowish hue that comes up from those like the foliage, and that can play tricks on you too. So yeah, it's hard to tell sometimes with this like kind of yellowish wash to the feathers underneath if that feels like an actual true, is it that color or not? And that's something, once again, if you're observing in the field, you'd probably be able to watch the bird long enough to get a better sense of that. But when in a photo,
absolutely,
you always got to question that.
Absolutely, and it can also enhance colors that are there. But if you got bright sun filtering through green leaves on a yellow bird, it can make that yellow shift in different ways. That's why we want to rely on structure for a lot of these birds, where the color is kind of hard to tell based on the situation. So that's, we look at that bill. And Eric Lundquist, another one of my brothers here, Eric is in the house, and he says gray Vireos are eating juniper berries, which makes a lot of sense. If they're crushing them up like little pine grosbeaks rather than just swallowing them whole. And
photo in question again. I don't know if you can go back.
Sure, I can back that up.
Yeah.
There's the photo in question.
Yeah. So you can see how if there was some light being cast up, kind of reflected back, like possibly it would make it look a little more yellow or green underneath.
Off the yellow flowers below it, sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a problem. Not a problem, but it's definitely a challenge that happens a lot, I feel like, in the field. I see a lot of birds that you feel like they have that yellow or greenish color until they move a little,
Hey, birding is hard, man. Well, look at this. We did it, Matt. You made it.
We got started, and we got through all of the photos. That's good.
Yeah, and we did the whole thing, and we didn't mess anything up except for Facebook. So those of you who made it over from Facebook, great. We're gonna have to apologize at some point on Facebook, but hey, Facebook has done this to us before. For those of you who are ABA members, get on over to ABA Community, our own social media program, social media platform, where we discuss all things bird without the noise of things like Facebook or Twitter or whatever it's called these days. And and come join the fun over there. And again, if you're in Minneapolis in a couple of weeks, get to our community weekend. Just go to aba.org and you will see the details there on our homepage. And if you like the things we do, like this program, and Nate, when usually Nate is here, I tell people that it's the best natural history podcast on the planet, which it is. You love the podcast and any of the other things we do, please consider joining the ABA and help supporting this and being a part of the club. We would love to have you. And Matt, I want to thank you very much for jumping in last minute. I mean, truly last minute, and having some fun with us here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. Hopefully my lack of bird ID knowledge didn't hurt it too much. So
a little bit, but we'll work on that. We'll work on that. All right, guys, that's it for now, and we will be back, and Nate will be back, and we're looking forward to seeing you in a couple weeks or so.
Bye.
See you guys.